Hello to everybody. Thank you, Anselm, and also the Rietveld Academie for inviting me. I'm glad to be here. Well, yeah, today, now you really can get the first sense of the Studium Generale. Means we have a cut in a way. Although I'm speaking on cybernetics and ecology, and this is of course, or would be also a question of counterculture. And Anselm already mentioned the whole Earth catalog, where this high technology and ecology came together. But I'm more interested in the process of cybernetization, which is still going on today. So not in cybernetics as a science, which developed in the beginning of the 40s, and then, well, ended in a way, beginning of the 70s, I would say, after 68 anyway, where artificial intelligence took over the field. But in difference to that, there's a process of cybernetization, and I will speak about this. And as Anselm already has pointed out, ecology is a very unstable term in a way, so the concept changed a lot since it was coined by Anselm in 1866, a German biologist, and it changed a lot up to today, means up in our cybernetic state of nature. But it still has to do something with, like, the logos of the oikos, the logos of the house, or of inhabiting or habitation, since we are today in a different mode of habitation, inhabiting the immanence of our media technological world. And that's, I want to speak about this in a bit. The title of my talk is Towards a General Ecology, an Emergent Paradigm. Ecology, task of thinking, says Michel Deleuze, a French poet and philosopher, and one of the close friends of Jacques Derrida, founders of the Collège de Philosophie Internationale in Paris. So, ecology, task of thinking, our task of thinking, one should put it to be precise, our task of thinking today and still to come, our next task of thinking. But the question is then, what is this coming task all about? What are its outlines? What are its stakes? From where has our becoming ecological being written? And how is this general ecology, as I would call it, and for this that the movie is all about, taking steps towards a general ecology as opposed to a restricted ecology? How is this to be characterized? That's the question. In 1992, Félix Guattari announced the rise of the new aesthetic paradigm in order to stress the image of being and thinking, and particularly the rise of new vectors of subjectivity emerging in the age of what he called post-media, what meant, in fact, post-mass media, the post-mass media era brought up by the computer and by computational media. With this notion of a new aesthetic paradigm, Guattari wanted to point towards what he called general aestheticization of all possible normative universes, and the empowerment of the aesthetic as the source of a wholesale re-evaluation of the inventive and the creative in all its various incarnations and modes of being and thinking. That means a lot beyond or before art, or beyond the institution of the art. A general aestheticization taking place during the process of cybernetization and being implemented by new media technologies, but not only at its affirmation, as its profound disturbance, as the interruption of this total cybernetization and the cybernetic containment of the subject implied. This, 20 years later, after this diagnosis of Guattari, we could say after a jump in the evolution of media technologies, as well as of a jump in the the modes of capitalist appropriation and occupation, the total colonization and catexis of its liberating aesthetic promises. To be more precise, after entering into the new digital matrix of today's algorithm-based media capitalism and its new computational environmentality, as I would call it, which is the accomplishment of the cybernetization of our forms of life that began more than half a century ago in the 50s. I suggest, in this situation, still following Gabrielle's intuition, that we speak instead of a general ecologization and call the emerging paradigm not the new aesthetic, but the new ecological paradigm. I think this is the point of the movement in the history of sense, where we are being exposed to, and whose exhibition and recognition is for me the central concern of a general ecology of media and technology today. Today we are witnessing the rise of a new ecological sense of mediation and processuality caused by the evolution of technological object cultures. Ubiquitous computing, what is this? It's a term coined by Mark Weiser. He said, first we had the mainframe era of the computer, then we had the PC era. You all know this, means the machine at the desk, at the top of the desk, the desktop. And Weiser had in the 80s already the vision of the disappearing. The machine had to disappear. It should disappear and inhabit, he said. It should inhabit the surroundings and our environment. So ubiquitous computing, new sensing technologies from GPS to RFID, implementing new modes of feeling, multiscalar network technologies, intelligent environments, all these parameters of our contemporary technological condition are bringing unseen couplings of humans and machines and are opening up a new stage in the history of objecthood or of objecticity, one could say, in general. According to the very convincing description of Mark Hansen, an American, US-American media theorist, this evolution already has started to exceed all objecticity as such, the objecthood. So that today the concept of the object and of the technical object itself has become obsolete and has been overtaken, and our new place within the history of object has yet to be determined. It's not clear. But Hansen writes, we must reconceptualize the coupling of human and techniques beyond the figure of the technical object. In the wake of computational technologies that distribute sensibility beyond consciousness, the correlation between human implicating individuation and techniques has moved beyond what we might think of as its objective stage, still Hansen, and has entered a properly processual stage in which techniques directly intensifies sub-perceptual dimensions of human experience. And he goes on, the technical object had to make way for technical processes that operate through far more complex implications with human activity. And instead of technical mediation of perception, that's the old stage of mediation in the history of media, today's question is the more indirect technical mediation of what he called an environmental sensibility. End of quote. In other words, during the last 50 years, a profound media historic caesura has taken place. The transition from the primacy of the symbolic and symbolic media, like the computing machinery, which worked on the basis of the symbolic logic, to the primacy of affective and ultimately atmospheric and so-called environmental media, where we are today. The reconceptualization of processuality and relation of a non-subjective subjectivity experience, and ultimately the redescription of what agency and means under the condition of this radical technical distribution as our new type of mediation today. What all this means, as well as the the corresponding amendment of our ways of thinking, well, this is the task of thinking today, and this is what the title of General Ecology stands for. To be blunt, I propose a general ecologization of thought and of theory. So thinking and theory as themselves, they have to become ecological. And I would propose this as an explicit conceptual political strategy and as the centerpiece of a contemporary critical theory. And this could be also a step towards a new enlightenment. The new paradigm of general ecology. Second part. The technological shift of sense characterizing our fundamental position marks a double caesura in the history of sense. The shift in the sense of techniques, as it occurs in the technique's own becoming technological, means technology itself changes its sense. And likewise, the concomitant shift of the sense as such. The great upending in the history of sense, in which we have been situated for more than a century, and that encompasses all possible universes of value and realms of being today, has been defined by this profound evolution of technological objects and its consequences for sense culture. First, the tool, the instrument, the utensil, and eventually also the machine, these old meanings of techniques and technology are superseded. As a result, there is a devaluation of that which corresponds with these kind of objective formations, which has been also principally associated with the subject, the human subject, and the working human subject, means the subject working with these machines. Secondly, there is a parallel rise of technological ensembles and networks as new directives of our sense culture. With these directives, the formation of a fundamentally passive culture of passive objects handled by active subjects, which had previously been at the center of our sense culture, of our meaning culture, this now progressively moved into the background. For the first time, technical objects in general lose their marginal sense cultural status and become decisive and autonomous. And in and through their agency, what agency means is henceforth dispersed and is no longer focused on the working meaning subject. In this way, technical ensembles and networks are in the strictest sense participatory and bringing up a new kind of, what I would call a new sense culture of technology with multiple transversal agencies beyond the centralization, monopolization of the working, meaning human subject. Today, this further incomplete sense cultural transformation is particularly determined by specific ubiquitous technical object cultures I just mentioned before. They are active and automated, more and more migratory and embedded in our environment, more greatly inform our infrastructure, and are supremely capable of computationally processing our experiential and existential backgrounds. And operating into micro-temporal regions means beyond our sense of temporality, and even in the eminent sense of really technological object cultures, which shape the face and the logic of our contemporary cyberneticization. And it is precisely this environmental constitution that sophisticated contemporary theories of media emphasize ever more intently. Leading protagonists in the field of media theory and the thinking of technology, they all have started to identify today's media technological assemblages as ecological and, by using this term, and environmental arrangements, enshrouding human subjects and all their faculties in interconnected computational environments and clouds of data, thereby not only bringing up new radically distributed arrangements of human and non-human sensation, forms of sensation and feeling, cognition, experience, but also showing that what has once been imagined as a classical, segmented, individualized subjectivity was always already in itself kind of an untenable illusion. To wit, through multiscalar media networks, Mark Hansen, whom I already mentioned, analyzed the radicalized technical distribution of agency as an explosion, what he said, of environmental agency, instead of concentrating on the formerly privileged individual agents of humans, and in so doing grasp the conceptual difficulties of a non-reductive understanding of a new so-called non-trivial environmentality. In view of multiscalar media surroundings, he stressed the necessity of a radical environmental perspective, as he put it, upon which, and again quote, a radical generalization and reconceptualization of subjectivity could be based. According to Hansen, media theory, due largely to the colonization of everyday life by digital devices and smart chips and sensors, have relocated from the classical media functions that you all know, such as recording, storage, and transmission, to a platform for immediate action facilitating interconnection with and feedback from the environment. Luciana Parisi, to give you another example, conceived of the corresponding technomedia configurations that cybernetized the modes of sensation by advancing bioinformatic integration of sensors, mobile media, and digital atmospheres, as plausibly also as techno-ecologies of sensation. That's her word, techno-ecologies of sensation. And by this she's drawing on a very famous notion of Lynn Margulies, a biologist. She died last year, which brought up the concept of an ecology of symbiogenesis. And Parisi means that we are made up by the symbiogenesis of the populations of bacteria, for example, living in our body. Therefore, Margulies coined this. She developed a new theory of evolution. And so Parisi took this notion of symbiogenesis and tried to describe with this our relation with environmental technical media, bionic machines, and so on. And Dirk Becker, to give another example, a German sociologist, has studied the structural and cultural forms of what he called the next society, which with the introduction of computers displays the modern society of the printing press. The modern society has been based on the printing press, through the introduction of the computer, the whole kind of functional differentiation of society has changed, he showed, and with this, what has been enforced, he called the ecological principle as its key feature. The next society would be, by Becker's account, I quote him, a more radical ecological order than we previously could have imagined. If ecology means, he goes on, that one gets involved with neighborly relationships between heterogeneous orders, which lack any pre-established coherence. Neighborly relationships between heterogeneous orders. I mean, Haeckel, who brought up the notion of ecology, he said, well, that's the entire of science of an organism's relation to its outside. And now we are, for example, here as a radical order of neighborly relationships between heterogeneous orders. So you see how the concept moves. Another scholar, Catherine Hales, to cite a final example, investigated technogenesis since the 1950s and the redefinition of cognition, of what cognition and thinking means, which paralleled it. the image of thought and the recent reconceptualization of the unconscious as cultivated by so-called embedded cognition, or even greater, to an even greater extent, the so-called extended cognition, directly testify following Hales to the transition to a new advanced technological environmentality, as she called it, particularly by means of the technical infrastructures of progressively more environmental forms of agency. I could go on and on giving examples. Brian Masumi, who analyzed the environmentality and the ecology of powers, or Lucy Parika's, I could cite Lucy Parika's work on viral media ecologies. Bernard Stiegler's plea for a new care for our libidinal ecology, which is now exploited and destructed, according to Stiegler, by contemporary media technologies. And in this, he's following up Marcuse. Or Matthew Fuller's extensive work on materialist media ecologies, or the concept even of ecotechnique brought into play by the French philosopher Jean-Luc Nancy, with which he wanted to describe the world's becoming technical and the appearance, as he says, of a kind, I quote, a kind of generalized environmentalism in the course of which everything is enveloped and developed according to the interconnectedness of what has been called the technological unconscious. End of quote. All these programmatic works and discoveries show, and this is the point I want to make here, how a new semantics describing the contemporary technomedial condition begins to crystallize around this concept of ecology, whereby the concept of ecology, and this is very important, itself is situated indisputably in a process of displacement, reformulation, and indeed revaluation. I mean, that's the instability you talked about, Anselm, before. And it is noteworthy that this is not a matter of the mere metaphorization of a concept, which in itself would be bound to a biological, ethological, or life scientific reference. Quite the opposite is true. It is more likely the case that the traditional ecology found in biology at the end of the 19th century causes kind of a breakthrough and imparts a principle form to the conceptual constellation, which as a consequence, in the course of the techno-medial development, ascends to a level of a new critical intuition and a new model for the basic description of our position in the world. French epistemologist Georges Canguilhem already anticipated precisely this when he wrote in 1947, the notion of milieu, of Umwelt, milieu, is becoming a universal and obligatory motor of apprehending the experience and existence of living beings. One could almost say, and that's the point which interests me, one could almost say that it is now being constituted as a category of contemporary thought. It was in 1947. In any case, the technological object cultures with which we are coupled are currently driving the ecologization of sensation, with the additional consequence, however, of ecologizing cognition, thought, desire, libido, I mentioned Stiegler, as well as power and government. In this respect, these new object cultures form the pivotal moment in a correspondingly altered sense-cultural situation, whose technological unconscious from now on can be generally referred to as an ecological unconscious, I would say. There have been made many attempts to conceptually come to terms with precisely this new techno-ecological sense of sense. I mean, with this situation, which is no longer available to the constitutive or traditional distinctions we have. This has included these attempts, but has not been limited to notions like assemblage, ensemble, montage, composition, heterogenesis, symbiogenesis. These are all leading concepts in theory since the 1970s. And I go on, being with, being together, appearing together, agency, entanglement, that's one of the newer concepts, the entanglement of human and non-human entities or actors and so on. One of the true challenges and focal points of today's conceptual politics is to redefine the constitution of sense culture according to the structure of this general ecology, which also comprises subsequent epistemic and ontological reforms, that's clear. As I argue, this is where the central conceptual and theoretical political battles and innovations of the past decade can be found. Therefore, I call it all these notions. These were the leading notions in the theoretical work. And the general ecology is an essential factor and even probably the key feature of our historicity. But if a general ecologization represents the basic movement of our era and leads into a new ecological paradigm, dictated almost by technological conditions, then it also entails, and as I already said, an extensive reevaluation of the sense of ecology. This reevaluation, without a doubt, represents one of the most exciting political theoretical theaters of our period and perhaps of the 20th century, the late 20th century and then even of our time. Ecology repeatedly invoked figures of the undamaged and the unscarred, the unspoiled, the intact, the immune, the whole, and the holy. I mean, the whole earth is the best example for this. And it participated, this notion always participated in a, what Derrida called a reaction to the machine. And to the uprooting, like he said, uprooting, relocalization, expropriation, which was the result of what Derrida called the techno-scientific machine. The unswerving drive to remain unscarred, constantly preferring figurations of identity, authenticity, of the being with oneself, or being at home. This was the clear, this was the sense always connected to ecology as I would say, as a restricted ecology. To ecology, as Zizek and especially Timothy Morton says, ecology as religion. On the other hand, the general ecology, which outlines the next ecological principle, in the process of re-evaluating the sense of ecology as such, obeys a very, very different, a general economy. It is an unnatural, non-natural, one might say, kind of a subtractive ecology. Left parenthesis, it is an, I hesitate to call it, as Timothy Morton does, an ecology without nature. It is not essentially a matter of rejection of nature as such, but rather a new thinking and reconceptualization of nature, namely a continuum of nature techniques with which we are confronted by the necessity of general ecology. I mean, Donna Haraway, for example, is the best example for somebody working out this kind of nature technique continuum. Hubert Simondon, the French philosopher, would be another, even earlier example. Those celebrating the end of nature as kind of religion and only as idea of some deep ecologists, fundamentalists, they misjudge themselves that nature has itself a certain historicity. According to Whitehead, there are epochs of nature and epochs of cosmology that change. the laws of cosmology of nature even changed, according to Whitehead. And we are living now in a cybernetic epoch of nature. End of this parenthesis. Therefore, I don't say ecology without nature. But still, it's a tension. Ecology is not only about nature. It's about unnatural, non-natural, techno-natural ecology today. It is an ecology which eliminates the immunopolitics of ecology. Ecology is a generalized being without essence, without substance, without reason, without purpose, without model, without meaning, etc. Perhaps a being of transforming and informing, like Nancy said. It is concerned with a new ecology of the techno-natural continuum, which the general environmentalization schematizes as the core of our present. That's the key figure, I think, to understand our position in the history of sense where we are through media technologies. And ever more so, this figure schematizes the basic experience we have, something which occurs by means of technology and the science of technology, as well as the concomitant explosion of nature. So I come to the end. General ecology, it should be emphasized, does not merely outline a new image of being and a new image of sense, to be outlined more precisely in the next future. And the general ecologization, one must affirm, is never merely a matter of an ecological turn, which, under the impression of the widespread ecological crisis that confronts us, affected our theoretical, contemporary theoretical agendas, which were sustained as short-lived fads and for a fleeting moment were briefly infused with ecological metaphors themselves inscribed in said agendas. It's not just another turn or something like this. It has much more to do with the new great transformation, to use a notion of Karl Polanyi, an historian of economy, who described that as the rise of capitalism. So this is a new grand transformation that has been identified here, which comes from far afield and, as I guess, will persist a long time. It is a matter of nothing less than the birth of a new attitude and approach, of a new style, in general, of the approaching normal style and the approaching normal form, which on the whole indicates a sweeping sense historical transformation that is going on today. So the concept of a general ecology that designates sustainable transformation, it must be noted, has itself a double reference to a change in the fundamental experience and a new fundamental position that characterizes being and thinking under the technological condition of the cybernetic state of nature. And on the other hand, to the redescription, the theoretical, the philosophical redescriptions that enforces that transformation. Thank you for your attention.